Irish rap group are this week being investigated by the UK counter-terrorism police after footage emerged of them making a number of, let's say, controversial comments during gigs over the past year or so. I thought I would begin this with a bit of a story so far of Kneecap, because I think their kind of rise and their various controversies along the way are really notable to kind of contextualize all of this, not in a way of excusing it or doing sort of apologia, because I think this particular comment and one other that's come up are not good, but I think it's kind of been an interesting rise and then several stumbling points to watch in terms of both how we talk about music, how we talk about politics, how we talk about talking about politics, and the contemporary sort of politics of colonialism, but also political violence. Rexrath says, since I'm from the US, can I assume I'm not expected to know who Kneecap is? So this is the trailer from the 2024 film Kneecap, which is a kind of fictionalized biopic of a band from West Belfast called Kneecap. They are a rap group. Band probably isn't the right word. I'm not cool. Who are kind of dual language in their music. They rap partly in English and partly in Irish, and kind of explicitly as a political statement in the Irish colonial experience, and as in many colonial experiences, the use and or suppression of language has been a key tool in kind of leveraging power over a colonized population. In fact, one of the kind of key plot points in the film is the push a few years back now. So in 2022, there was a big push and then like a bit of a controversy or not controversy, bit of an argument, I guess, in Northern Irish politics, because there was a move to make Irish an official language of Northern Ireland. Up until that point, that had not been the case. English had been the official language of Northern Ireland. And that's kind of a key part of their thing, right? The dual language nature of it is kind of a political act, as well as the fact that elsewhere in their music it is stories, partly of a lot of drug taking, but also of living in West Belfast in the kind of post-Troubles era. Yeah, and I mean, I suppose it's worth saying for context, for anyone that's watching who isn't in the UK or maybe even is, like, it's been getting on for 3 decades since the Good Friday Agreement now. And the kind of supposed ending of the Troubles, the civil war, for want of a better word, between the IRA and the British state forces in Northern Ireland. And while there is a huge amount of kind of like peace that has come out of that, there have still been kind of flashpoints. And also, if you go to Northern Ireland or the north of Ireland, whatever your preferred vocabulary is, it's hard to get across the extent to which it is like written on the architecture of the spaces. Whether that's if you go to Derry, you'll see murals which are kind of depicting various aspects of Irish Republican struggle over the years, but also just like driving around, there will be flags everywhere. Like, I I don't know, I've lived in the UK all my life, but like driving around the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic, like I have never seen more Union Jacks when you're like sort of just this side than there. Like I guess maybe when it's the Olympics, like maybe, or other events like that, but it is, it feels like being somewhere where there is attention around, and that kind of bleeds through in a lot of their music, and it comes through in the film as well. It's a very silly film, as well as it kind of both has a lot of poignancy to it. It also is very silly in other places as well. Very funny film, and the band have been on a pretty steady rise over the past kind of couple of years, let's say. But that entire journey has been filled with various controversies. The film came out in January 2024, and the group kind of had their first real run-in with the British state not too long after. So the month after the film first debuted at the Sundance Film Festival, where it was this kind of like almost surprise hit, it was the first Irish language film to ever be premiere, at least, or maybe even play at Sundance. And it kind of got picked up by Sony for distribution, which I'm not sure was necessarily expected, but it kind of gave an increased platform to the band's music. Although at the same time, they had been kind of building a bit of a reputation anyway. And there was a moment shortly after. So the film premieres at Sundance in the January. In the February, Kneecap had kind of applied for some money as part of a government-funded scheme called the Music Export Growth Scheme, which is a scheme which is, I believe, funded by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, which is our kind of like arts and sport department of the government, and the business department, the Department for Business, Industry, and but is administered by a kind of industry body called the BPI. And the kind of point of the funding was to kind of help bands that were doing well in the UK kind of break into the international market. So, if you're a band that's gigging around the UK and you're selling some records within the UK, but you've yet to break America or break into Europe or whatever, this was like a bit of money to enable, I think the phrase was kind of like music organizations, so I think particularly kind of labels and bands and groups, to kind of give them a bit of money to sort of help them do that where they otherwise might not be. Kneecap had applied for this money. They had been awarded this money by the BPI, and broadly speaking, most arts funding within the UK tends to be administered by what are called arm's length organisations. And this is the idea that it is good for the culture of the country that there is some subsidy for artistic works, and also for stuff like museums and stuff like that, other sort of cultural organisations, but that if the government directly is deciding who should and shouldn't get that money, that becomes a whole thing about, well, would a Conservative government only give money to conservative art, right? That's all about how Maggie Thatcher's great and I don't know, Brexit's fantastic. Or would similarly, would a Labour government just be giving money to kind of arts projects which were saying the opposite? this is like, there's lots of areas in which the government outsourcing a thing is like inherently bad, right? It is silly that we, I don't know, outsource so much of highways stuff, right? Rather than, there are roads that you drive down in the UK that are like, this road is maintained on behalf of the highways agency, like by a private company, and that's like silly. They're not going to do a better job. They're not going to do it cheaper. They're going to waste a bunch of money, and the fact that goes to be profits. It's silly when a private company comes in to run part of the NHS, because it's not going to be more affordable. There's no magic way in which a company taking a bunch of profit from a service makes it cheaper to run. However, in this case, like, there is probably a good argument for a quango, right? Because whether you agree with the government of the day or not, do you want them to have control over, like, direct control over what is and isn't funded? Probably not. However, in this, so the decisions over who got this money had been handed over to the BPI, but Kemi Badenoch, who at that point was the Business and Trade Secretary, kind of stepped in and said, no, we're actually not going to give you this money. And, if the intention was to kind of shut Kneecap down at this point, the result was very much not that, because suddenly there is news stories all about the government trying to shut down this rap group. And, Badenoch's kind of argument for doing so was that, just to, every word of Irish spoken is a bullet fired for Irish freedom. Like, the film is very much anti the British state, at the very least, is what you would say. Whether or not you think it is partisan in its Republican politics, which it probably is, I think it gives some. It does kind of also take the mick out of. There's a kind of mock, like, post IRA terrorist group within it, and that they kind of take the piss out of as well. But sort of Kemi Badenoch's argument was, well, this band are explicitly anti-British. That is like their thing. They do not want the North of Ireland to be part of the UK. Should we be funding that? But of course, there was considerable outrage at the fact that, this kind of arm's length arts funding had been given out, and then the government had stepped in and gone, no. So Kneecap decided to challenge the decision in the court. It's worth also saying that the amount of money they'd won was like 14 grand, like just under 15 grand. So it also, in the grand scheme of things, and certainly in the scheme of government grants to businesses or to arts organisations, whatever, was not a huge amount of money. But obviously having the ability to, having this whole story about the money being withdrawn certainly provided a new, kind of newsworthy story, which kind of, if the goal was to stymie the ability of Kneecap to like gain a larger audience, this was one further step in terms of in allowing them to kind of use that controversy to do so. It's interesting in many ways that one of the sort of plot lines within the film is that the local radio station suggests that they might play Kneecap on the radio and then refuses to, or kind of opts not to, and then that controversy within the film kind of helps bring them to a wider audience within Belfast. And so there's kind of there was kind of like an interesting mirror to that in there. But so they won their court case. The film came out. The film, it's worth saying, was incredibly well received, not only at Sundance but then afterwards. It won a BAFTA, and there's a really touching speech by the director of the film, which we can maybe find at the BAFTAs.
An awful time to get pins and needles in your leg. Really bad timing. Wow, I'm absolutely honoured to be standing here. 15 years ago, today I actually met my wife, and a decade later, she convinced me to move to Belfast. And within 2 weeks of moving to Belfast, I met Kneecap, and now I'm standing here. And it's weird how life works like that, right? I mean, Kneecap it's more than a film. It's a movement, and it's about how everyone should have their language respected, they should have their culture respected, and they should have their homeland respected. And so this award is dedicated to everyone who's out there fighting that fight. Thank you very much.
So the film's a massive success. They begin to gain even more of a platform from that. And then earlier this month, they play Coachella. It was a pretty big gig. I think they played twice. I'm not sure if that's a thing that Coachella that you do, whether it's like Reading and Leeds Festival or something. They played a couple of sets at Coachella, and it was absolutely packed. They went on, weirdly enough, they walked on with Hassan, which, having only seen the footage from this angle, I'm not entirely sure sort of why. I guess it's just fun. But like, they walk on and then he's just kind of hanging out at in the background. I guess maybe this is me not being like a cool rap person. But the thing you'll notice here, more than anything else, more than kind of Hassan walking on, is that they walk out with a Palestinian flag. And like many people in Ireland, the group feel a very strong solidarity with the people of Palestine, and they have repeatedly kind of used their concerts and their platform as a platform for talking about the ongoing genocide in Gaza. At the opening, well, partway through the set, they had kind of, I don't know what the phrase is, slogans, words, projected as part of their kind of display at the back of the stage about, Israel is perpetuating a genocide in Gaza. Later on, it kind of flashed up, "Fuck Israel, free Palestine." They sort of led free Palestine chants during the gig. Like, it was, they did one of them sort of did a little speech in the middle about, the US government could stop this tomorrow.
The Irish not so long ago were persecuted at the hands of the Brits, but we were never bombed from the fucking skies with nowhere to go. The Palestinians have nowhere to go. It's their fucking home, and they're bombing them from the skies. If you're not calling it a genocide, what the fuck are you calling it? Free, free! Free, free! Free, free! Free, free! Free, free!
So Kneecap used their slot at Coachella as this kind of platform for talking about genocide in Gaza, and then everything kind of goes wild, right? I think it's worth saying that while they clearly make very partisan statements during that, right? Partisan in the case of like being anti-genocide, within the Coachella, at least the parts of the Coachella set that I've seen, it is a like yes, that there is anti-Israel sentiment, but not particularly anything which should be deemed controversial. Nevertheless, there is something of a backlash led by, and if you've not been following this story, you will not guess who I'm about to say. I'm going to leave you hanging in suspense. It's Sharon Osbourne. Sharon Osbourne begins leading a charge for Kneecap to have their visas revoked. And she kind of tries to make it a thing about how they're, they've made their performance political. She calls for their US work visas to be revoked after politicized Coachella performance. Osbourne, 72, was incensed by the show and criticized festival organizers for allowing Coachella to become a platform for political expression. Yes, I do need... Yeah, just to clarify to anyone in the chat, I do mean Ozzy Osbourne's wife. She said, writing on X Factor, the divisive former X Factor judge. I'm not sure she is divisive. I feel like divisive implies that she's someone that anyone's thought about for the past 5 years. I don't know, I guess she was rude. Is that she was on the X Factor and she was rude in the X Factor? Is that... I'm not sure. Divisive. There was also a sort of Meet the Osbournes or something with the Osbournes. Inside the Osbournes, there was some sort of reality show as well. At Home with the Osbournes. I can't remember what it's called now. I think it might be called the Osbournes, actually. First name bunch number says, don't remember her being any different to the other judges. I think she was the kind of Simon Cowell or Piers Morgan. She was the rude judge that just goes you're bad. And we loved that in the thousands. In the 2000s, just being mean was a sort of cultural phenomenon. So Sharon Osbourne comes out suggesting that the US government should revoke Kneecap's work visa. We also get this fantastic video, which I am fascinated by. So this is Michael Rappaport, who... But my understanding is that he's in quite a lot of stuff. I mostly know him as the dad from Atypical, was the show called, which I quite liked. Who you're about to watch a guy who I can sort of take or leave Kneecap's music. No, I don't it's good. I'm not going to listen to every day, You're about to watch a guy who has to not like a thing because of politics.
Kneecap? Who the f*** is Kneecap? Uses screaming around.
Sorry, just to clarify, this man has beeped his own video.
Jumping around. Not one of yous play the piano. Not one of yous strum a guitar. Can't one of yous sing a lick and you call that music? Kneecap? I see one of yous wears a mask. You won't even show your face, apparently. You look like your mom your sister and had you. That's why you won't show your ugly
I'm not sure if he's doing an Irish accent, but maybe this is... Cause I think he's got a... I don't know where you would place the accent, but when I've seen him in things, this is not his accent.
Face. You can't blow a bagpipe. You can't sing a lick. You can't play the piano. Do you even know how to play with yourselves? Kneecap and Coachella. It's supposed to be a music festival. You turned it into a monkey festival. There's shite music. This is not...
I'm actually going to stop because it's kind of... Yeah, so Tim saying in the chat, love the pearl clutching around, can't believe music is political now. I think there is also... It's also worth saying that you've invited Kneecap, right? You have because this is something that comes through in both this and also Sharon Osbourne talking about like making it political. Obviously, we can talk about how all art is political in one way or another. You've also specifically invited a band that have a song called "Get Your Brits Out." Like their whole thing is political, like that sort of without politics there is not a Kneecap at all. So the idea that there would be this kind of surprise is silly. And I don't know, in some of the stuff I was reading from Sharon Osbourne, I wonder whether some of it is like trying to appeal to Coachella as a festival, as like an organization. And when you, I don't know, you're like complaining to a company or something, and you're doing the thing of going like, oh, I'm sure you didn't realize that you did this thing, because you're trying to sort of give them the leeway to apologize rather than going all guns blazing. So alongside the thing of kind of like all art is political in one way or another, alongside the, as someone was saying in the chat, like, should people use their platforms to talk about topics like this? Some people would sort of say there is the obligation to do so. You have also specifically invited a political rap group, right? And then over the past couple of days, there have been videos that have emerged of the group performing earlier this year and a couple of years ago, where during their performance they do make comments which if their Coachella performance contains a strongly opinionated comments, these go a bit further. There's been two videos that have emerged from performances. One, kind of allegedly the phraseology which keeps appearing in reports is that a social media clip, which so far had, as far as I can tell, has kind of disappeared, but quote, appeared to show one member of the group shout, "Up Hamas, up Hezbollah." The further one that emerged was from the year prior, in November 2023, where a member of the group, again, appeared to show, is the phraseology that's being used, one member of the band saying, "The only good Tory is a dead Tory, kill your local MP," which is the point at which things go a little bit further, right? And not only in a kind of moral sense, in the UK there are legal ramifications, particularly for the first comments. So in the UK, Hamas and Hezbollah are both prescribed terrorist organizations, which means that not only is it a crime to be a member of those organizations, it is also a crime punishable by time in prison to express support for them in various different ways. I think I'm right in saying that. So this kind of process of having organizations that are prescribed as terrorist organizations has existed since about 2000. It's or the year 2000 exactly. It's kind of war on terror era legislation, and yeah, it effectively allows the government to go like, look, this particular group is beyond what we consider it to be like justifiable for someone to express support for. This is kind of one of those ways in which speech laws in the UK, and often in a a lot of Europe kind of differ from that kind of absolutist US model of sort of you can say anything. Both organizations, kind of the military wings of Hezbollah and Hamas, I think I'm right in saying, were prescribed back in 2001, sort of amongst some of the first organizations that were prescribed. But both are now like fully prescribed. Like it is, so there was a point where, in theory, you could express support for like the political arm of Hamas. You now cannot do that either. Like the entire organization is prescribed organization. And so kind of as this fact sheet saying here, it's a criminal offence for a person in the UK to belong to a prescribed organisation, invite support for a prescribed organisation, recklessly express support for a prescribed organisation, arrange a meeting in support of a prescribed organisation, wear clothing or carry articles in public which arouse reasonable suspicion that an individual is a member or supporter of a prescribed organisation, or publish an image of an article such as a flag or logo in the same circumstance. So you can sort of show a flag for informational purposes, but not for support. QWERTY 2023 says that even the health ministry, like the entire Hamas organization is sort of deemed within British law to be a terrorist organization. You'll often hear sort of like on the news, they'll often talk about kind of the sort of Hamas-run health ministry or whatever. I would be very surprised if the police would do anything were you to specifically say that you think the very particular health bits that they do are bad, but like sort of the idea is that it's all embroiled in the same kind of organizational soup. And so this is kind of taking things to another level. And so counterterror police, are looking through the footage to consider whether or not they will prosecute or charge, Kneecap. It's worth also saying that the other clip was kill your local MP, which is quite a direct, even in US conversations around freedom of speech, kind of the idea of like you can't shout fire in a crowded building, like you can't instruct a person to do a thing, is questionable even there. And all of this obviously comes only a few years after there have been members of parliament who have been killed, right? And so it's been, particularly in Parliament today, has been a kind of rallying point for MPs. Here we go. Here's Mark Francois in Parliament today.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I wish to raise a point of order which I have given Mr. Speaker prior notice. All of us in this House know that Mr. Speaker has a deep personal commitment to the safety of members of Parliament and their families. In that context, video has emerged this weekend of a concert held in London some months ago at which an Irish Republican band called Kneecap told a cheering audience that, and I quote directly from the clip, "The only good Tory is a dead Tory," and they then implored their audience, "Kill your local MP." I'm not a lawyer, but to my mind this is incitement to murder. And quite rightly, the anti-terrorist police are now investigating. This is beyond despicable. And I say that looking across the chamber at the plaque of our fallen comrade, Sir David Amos, and that one behind me, to a fallen comrade, Joe Cox. This is across all parties. They both died serving their constituents. So may I ask through you, Madam Deputy Speaker, of Mr. Speaker, 3 things. 1, that the Home Secretary should come to this House by no later than tomorrow and make a full statement on what the government understand has happened here and exactly what they intend to do about it to protect all those in public life, not just MPs and their families. Secondly, that the Secretary of State for DCMS, who I see is in her place, I did notify her, should also give a public explanation, ideally via a statement, of how it came to pass that this band were given some £14,000 of British taxpayers' money in a grant. Sorry, you don't normally heckle points of order, but if you're going to do that, our leader Kemi Badenoch refused it, they appealed, and your government didn't oppose the appeal. Yes. Those are the facts. So could you please explain to us?
I think, to be fair, context, to give some sort of context to that decision, I think the Labour Party's decision not to further contest the 14 grand in arts funding was less about wanting to or not wanting to give them the money than it was about the fact it was going to cost a lot more than 14 grand to fight it any further.
How exactly that happened? I didn't want to make this bipartisan, but you interrupted me. And thirdly, and by the way, how we can get the money back. And thirdly, I understand that Kneecap are still booked to appear at Glastonbury, which under the circumstances would be unconscionable. So as the Speaker is chairing a Speakers' Conference on MP safety, could we implore him through you, Madam Deputy Speaker, to write to the organisers of the Glastonbury Festival and say that this House does not think it is appropriate that Kneecap should be allowed to appear, at least until the investigation is completed. I ask this, if I may, on behalf of all of us and all of our families. I hope, Madam Deputy Speaker, that is not unreasonable.
Non-binary saying in the chat, Transmit too, yeah, so Transmit's a festival in Glasgow, I think. And someone has, John Swinney, who is the current First Minister of Scotland, has also kind of backed that calls to sort of cancel their slot at Transmit. It's worth adding for sort of fairness, I guess. It's worth saying that Kneecap's response to the initial kind of criticisms of their concert at Coachella was that there had been a kind of coordinated smear campaign and including the Hamas and Hezbollah comments, and there's a real and I think they're probably in one of those positions where two things can be true at once, right? You can, yes, people have come down upon them because they did a set where they made entirely justifiable comments in the Coachella set. They, yes, opinionated, but justifiably so. The other thing that can also be true is that they have also made some dicey, at the very least strictly illegal in the UK, comments in the past. I mean, the sort of question that I would say is worth considering is, as someone who kind of personally does kind of find, I think there is an attempt to be edgy as much as anything, which I think completely just falls short. I think we can, some kind of some comments in the chat about the ways in which many of the MPs talking there, very involved in structural violence against trans people, disabled people, have not acted as much as they should have to try to end the genocide in Gaza. At the same time, like, I think the bar has to be to do better than that, right? And like those more, the comments that have come out more recently, I think very clearly kind of cross over that line. The thing that it kind of leaves up in the air is the extent to which the kind of prescribed organization's kind of system is very much a product of post 9/11 war on terror years, where the victory of liberal democracy amongst nation states was alive and well, and the forces of darkness or whatever were thought to be non-state groups, right? It was Al-Qaeda and ISIS, etc. There is something troubling about the fact that, it is still entirely possible to express support for the IDF and for the actions of the State of Israel at a time when they are very clearly conducting a genocide. In fact, a lot of broadcasters, BBC for example, consider it necessary when talking about these topics that you have to actively invite someone on to express that position, right? That is not only a thing that you can do, but a opinion that needs to exist in these conversations. I think the correct and the only real justifiable moral stance is that telling people to kill MPs is dumb and morally unconscionable, and so is MPs passing laws which do structural violence to marginalised groups. Throwing out support for Hamas and Hezbollah is similarly my assumption is an attempt to be like edgy and cool, and I think is ludicrous and morally unjustifiable in the same way that expressing support for the actions of the State of Israel is. And so I think the challenge is to hold those two things at once.